Hello everyone, this is Dave Brethauer. I'm going to be sharing today a project I made for Simple Pleasures Stamps, a store in Colorado. It's this wonderful store that I got to teach at a few years ago when I met Kathy, the store owner, and since then we've been collaborating on anniversary products each year that I designed for her. This year we decided to do a stamp set based on a sunflower design, and it's a really terrific design. I love how it turned out, and I wanted to just show you how I created a loose watercolor project using that image. So what I've done is take a 140-pound cold press piece of watercolor paper, and I've stamped that with a waterproof ink, just in plain old black, and I've taped it to the surface of my craft mat just with some washi tape. You could use any kind of tape, painter's tape or whatever. You just need to secure the edges to keep it from warping. Now to start, I've added a lot of water to the petals just to get those petals nice and wet. And then I've created another layer of yellow paint just as a base because I know I want everything to be yellow on there, but I want to put a color down first just so that when I start adding those different layers, there'll be that yellow showing through, and I want it to blend, and this will be a nice base to put more colors on top. So now starting right around the perimeter of that center, I'm going to add some orange. And by the way, you can use any watercolor you like. I'm using Gansei Tambe watercolor set, and I'm blending that out by putting some color down and then taking a slightly damp brush and sort of fixing the edges. It's going to naturally blend out because it's wet, but this helps it along. Now I'm going to go in with a more intense orange. Keep in mind that this is going to dry lighter than you see here. So I put the orange down, just dab it around, and then I go back with a damp brush or slightly dry brush and pull that out. That's just going to help that color blend out along the petal. And the movement of the color is darker towards the inside and then lighter as you get to the tip of each petal. And the process is the same. You're just going to nudge that color along so that it's deep at the center and lighter at the tips. If it doesn't blend out exactly perfectly, that's okay. If you see an edge of color on the leaf, that just makes it more interesting to look at and gives you that wonderful watercolor look with those little watercolor edges. I'm going to add some more intense color now along the tips of the petals. I'm just adding some yellow, a little bit stronger concentration, and then going back and blending that out just a little bit. Again, it's okay to leave some of that untouched because it just creates a little bit of texture and color differences along each petal. Now I want to continue to add layers of color. Here just a little bit more of that orange watery mix towards the interior of each petal. All of those petals are wet enough now that the color is going to travel pretty much on its own. So I'll let that just do its thing. I'm going to reposition the artwork so that the camera can focus in on the leaves. I'm going to start on those down below, and I'm going to follow the same process. First I'll begin by putting some paint down first. This is just basically wetting the leaf and stem areas. I put a nice chartreuse color on there as the base. It's slightly green. So as I add more greens, it's going to let that color sort of show through and blend out. I usually work with a wet texture on my watercolor paper. I like how it helps me blend things along. So I tend to keep things pretty damp as I work. Now I'm not going to pay too much attention to the types of greens that I put on here. Some are going to be a little more yellow, some will be a little bit more blue. And the idea is to create a lot of different color on each leaf just to add some color differences and interest as you go. Take your time. Those little areas are a little bit tricky to paint in, but if I go outside the line, I'm not really going to worry about it. This is a loose watercolor sketch kind of project, and I think I want to just keep it kind of simple. Now if the color seems a little too intense, like that olive color that I put on there, I'm going to just blot a little bit of it off. Just have a paper towel nearby or a napkin that you can soak some of that excess paint up off of the surface of the paper, and then continue to add the layers of color on as you normally would, and dab off if you need to remove some color here and there. Now I'm going to let that set, and I'm going to go back to those original petals up in the bloom. It's dry, so I'm going to add another layer at this point. I'm going to put a little bit of water on there just to kind of get things wet. And I want to add maybe just a little bit more color to help define that space. I do like to let the artwork dry a little bit in between layers if I have time, because once it's settled out, then I can kind of see where the colors have ended up and how strong they are. I wanted the petals of the sunflower to be a lot more bold, so I put in some really strong red-orange paint around the circle, and I've blended it out here just a little bit with a damp brush, adding a little bit more paint as I need to. And I want to make sure I don't go all the way to the tip of each petal, because I want to keep some of that intact. I want it yellow at the tips, and then a deep orange rust color as you get towards the center of the flower. Now you can see here I have pretty much the entire flower painted in, and I want to do the background now. So I'm going to take a wide flat brush and lots of water, and I'm just putting a little bit of liquid all around the flower. I'm not worrying too much about getting every single spot on the watercolor paper, because once I start adding the paint, I can work quickly enough to fill all that space in. But I want to put water down first because I want it to be sort of blended and light and airy. And if I want to add more paint, I can, but I'm going to start out relatively light with my touch on paint. So I'm going to take this violet shade, I guess it's kind of a burgundy violet shade. I'm going to start painting that around the petals of the sunflower. And I'll use a smaller brush to get into all the little nooks and crannies. I'm going to be a little random where I place the color, and you can see that that watery area helps that paint blend out. I'm going to concentrate the color close to the flower so that the color is a little bit more intense right at the petal area, and then as you move out it tends to diminish. And I'm going to throw another color in here, a nice teal color. I think that looked nice with that burgundy violet color, and they'll blend together. Just use plenty of water depending on what you're going to paint your background with. More water helps you blend things out. So I chose the teal towards the bottom. I think that's a nice match for that green of the leaves. And then I chose that reddish violet burgundy tone towards the top. I think that's a nice foil for the sunflower petals. I think that looks like a nice backdrop in contrast. When you go from one side of the petal to the other side, you want continuity with the color. So you're just going to jump over that stem so that it blends out on either side. And now that I've seen it settle, I'm going to go back and add a little bit more color. Just punch it up a bit just to make sure that there's nice intense color right near the petals, and then it sort of fades out as you get further away. And you don't have to go around the entire design. I chose to, just to kind of frame it in, give it something to ground it, but it's totally up to you. This is a really experimental and fun sort of thing, and I want you to enjoy the process. Now if things seem to get dry, go back with your brush, add a little bit more plain water over the paint. I tend to let that dry a little bit before I go back because I don't want to pull the color around. So make sure that that background's relatively dry before you add plain water again. And then you can go back and add more color. So I took a bright fuchsia paint here. I wanted to make it even more intense around those petals so it would really pop. And I went right up to the petal and allowed that intense color to sort of settle into the little nooks and crannies. And again, don't worry too much about staying inside or outside the lines. This is a loose watercolor design. Things can overlap a little bit. It'll just add to the look. So I love how this pink color is transforming this background. It's really changing how that teal works with the red color, and it's making a beautiful third and fourth additional colors there. Want to add in a little bit more blue. That creates sort of a purple in the middle, and you can see that shift from bright pink to purple to blue to teal. Oh, you just can't get any other effect like that with any other kind of medium. Watercolor is so magical that way. And I just want to add in a few little details here and there just to make this as colorful as possible. Now you can see here how you could spend an entire afternoon filling in the background. I think I'm going to leave it where it's at, and this is a convenient time to go back and work on the center of the sunflower. All of that wet area is not touching that center, so it's a good time for me to go in and start filling that in with color. I'm going to put some paint down as a base, a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow, just because I know I want that tone for the center of the flower. And then once that's on there, I'm going to start deepening it. So I'm going to leave a little bit of yellow at the top. I want there to be a little bit of glow at the top of the sunflower center. And then I'm going to start adding in some browns and some deeper colors because I want that to be dark in there with a little bit of gradation. You can see I'm trying to keep that top nice and warm yellow, and then the bottom is more and more intense brown. Now once everything is dried, this probably took about 30-45 minutes to dry, but give it a good hour. I'm going to put a little bit of paper on top of the center because I want to flick it with some metallic paint. I love putting a little bit of specks of color on top of watercolor paintings. I think it adds a little bit of texture, and I'm crazy about these starry color watercolor paints. It's got this nice gold, and I just put a little bit onto a transparent piece of plastic and flick it. You can see that that is a well-used palette. I use lots of different colors on top of my projects and just keep adding to it. You can see how that turns out so nice. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. The watercolor was really fun to do, and I encourage you to try it. This stamp set has lots of different possibilities. You can do watercolor or just plain old marker and get a lot of use out of it. Thanks for stopping by today, and be sure and visit simplepleasurestamps.com to get this stamp set.